Hi everyone, it's Justin Dawson. It's Sunday, the 19th of March 2023. Here is episode 72 of the All Things TechIE Podcast, where it was recorded on March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, where I caught up with Ron Epstein, Senior Director of Higher Education and Marketing Communications at Epiphan. We talked to Ron about his life in audiovisual, his life with Epiphan, and had a pint of Guinness at the end of it. Enjoy episode 72 of the All Things TechIE Podcast. It starts now.
Here's the show that loves to talk about gadgets and gizmos, from A-Logic to Yamaha, cameras to control panels. You get what I mean. We love talking all things techie. In fact, that's the name of the show. And here is your host, Justin Dawson.
Well, it's the All Things TechIE Podcast. We have one very special episode here. It's St. Patrick's Day. I put on the headphones. I turned off my headphone volume to make sure that there's no sound coming out in the distance, because in my local region, the parade is going on in the background. I could hear like tractors beeping their horns. Yeah, I'm saying tractors. I do live in the Dublin countryside, the North Dublin countryside, but I was able to steal a very important person from Epiphan to join me on St. Patrick's Day. He's wearing a green strap for his watch and everything, just for the day that's in it with his Fitbit. Ron Epstein, thank you so much for joining us on All Things Techie. Please, let's start off. Where did the world of audiovisual begin for you, Ron?
Jeez, that's it's weird. It's a loaded question because it began a long time ago. Back in 2006, I started working for Sony Electronics. So it's funny. A lot of people kind of know me from my previous, role, but I've been in this industry 17 years. So
where does those years go? Like we both.
Well, that's the thing is, I'm like 17 years. I felt like I started working just a couple of years ago. But yeah, no, I started at Sony Electronics back in 2006 on the professional side. So not like consumer TVs or anything, but pro displays and even just media storage. And then starting to do some work in the verticals, government and education. And then finally ended up working in cinema, which was like one of the most fun jobs ever. You get paid to go to movie premieres and stuff like that. But
okay, come on, let's name drop. What have you been to?
I remember I was at the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo remake.
Nice.
I did a whole bunch of marketing for the restoration of Taxi Driver, the 4K restoration, because I worked on the 4K side. So the projectors at Sony, it was the first like commercialized 4K product. So we, depending on what your perspective on movie theaters and film versus digital is, was part of kind of that switch over from film projection to digital 4K projection. So that was around 2009, 2010, and then so complete deployment of 4K at Regal and AMC cinemas. That's the big cinemas in the US. So it was an awesome time. That's the scourge of 3D at the time too, where all the movies were coming out in 3D
and like 3D goggles is going to be the next thing.
Oh yeah.
Between that and at that time, it was also the bendable curved screens. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that sort of died a death very quickly.
Yeah, I remember being at I'm trying to think, it was like Infocoms and NABs where I saw these gigantic like a 60-inch at that time, gigantic 60-inch TV monitor, whatever you call it, with that curve. And I looked at it and I'm like, I never liked it because
I never liked it.
I sit like 7 feet away from it, and it's like, what's the value of a curve unless you're like face into it? So I get it for gaming monitors, I guess, but there were a lot of fads at the time. It was funny because you think about the whole TV and display business at that point before it really became a commodity. They had to come up with all these different ways to sell you something new. So they would tweak everything. And what if we did this? And you started seeing some kind of ridiculous, ridiculous inventions at the time.
Yeah, well, like that's it. Like I go on record. I've said it on a lot of podcasts. I don't get VR. I don't get the whole idea of wearing goggles. Um, Even the metaverse. Joey, I know you're listening because I have Ron on. The metaverse is dead. I've said it, right? The metaverse is dead, and Ron, is the metaverse dead?
I've talked to Joe about the metaverse long before it died, and yes,
So he said long before it's died, it's dead. It's dead.
Listen, it's funny because you bring up VR, and VR is like, it's funny because my kids, they want, I have a PlayStation 5, so they want the VR 2 that came out. And I went over to a buddy's house to play it recently, and I was like motion sick from it. I really like I was playing Gran Turismo racing game, and I'm just, I'm like looking around while I'm driving, and then I look out the side of the window and I'm like, wow, this is too much. And I don't know what it is about VR, but it's so hard for me to just get into it. But you know what? The kids love it. There's a game called Job Simulator, which is hilarious. Like it's like a job simulator, which for us is called a job. They're working in a convenience store, and they're grabbing like ketchup and mustard, and all they're doing is just squeezing it on things, and it's the greatest thing in the world for them. It's hilarious.
Kids, can you do the same in our kitchens at home? Can you make daddy?
I mean, I wish they had kitchen cleaner for VR for the and house cleaner and stuff like that, so the kids would start developing those skills.
I guess VR is still there for gaming, but I think if we look at the higher ed vertical and trying, I've seen simulations where they've asked to do this in our clinical education center and clinical skills labs, and I'm like, no, XR, and those type of things, and even Igloo, that's great. Like, you're bringing it into an immersive 360 environment. But I think it's like that when you start wearing goggles and then immediately you take it off, you're complete and utter motion sickness.
Yeah.
and the dangers of tripping over someone as well. I think that's another thing as well.
Yeah, no. Thankfully we haven't experienced that at friends' houses yet.
But so before you joined Sony, like what was your degree in? What did you study in college?
I have a degree in marketing, and then I got an MBA in marketing as well. I loved the idea of, I'm trying to think of like advertising and understanding need and meeting need, and how you talk to people in order to get them to understand your message. Like, it's weird, like some kids, they see something and they're like, that's what I want to be. And for me, I loved marketing. I loved like the psychology of it and everything. And at just a young age, I felt like it was what I was going to do. And then you get to college, and then you're like, wow, all this stuff that I thought marketing was, that's not what they're teaching us in school. They're teaching me finance, and they're teaching me all these other things, and calculus, and just, I'm like, yeah. I really want to just get to the marketing. But as I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, you don't get to choose your own way all the time, and you've got to learn other things, because maybe you can adapt it, or maybe just the idea of having to do something that you don't want to do makes you more, allows you to cope more with life's challenges in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So from Sony, was it from Sony to Crestron at that stage?
No, it wasn't.
No, there's a couple of things in between.
No, I stopped over at Sharp Electronics for about 2.5 years. And so my job at Sony was very much on the marketing side. And then when I went over to Sharp, I started dipping my toe into comms and social media. And this, I don't know, this is like around 2012, 2013. And because I think for me, the more important thing was, I don't want to take what I was doing at Sony and just do that again. I want to develop some other skills where I can take that experience from Sony and apply it to something new. And so that's kind of where the PR and social media, the communication side of marketing kind of came in for me. And I was there for about 2.5 years. It's really tough. I know Sharp is in much better state right now, but the hardest thing in the world is to do comms and PR for a company that is having troubles. Like, it's every conversation everybody wants to have is about, hey, are you guys gonna make it? Is it, like, what type of, like, it's never a positive conversation of, oh, tell me about that great solution you've developed. Tell me about this application. It's always like, hey, tell me the dirt. And it's like, no, like so it's hard to have that type of role when there was so much flux at that time.
You know what? I was just talking about that type of negativity that where it could actually happen in the next couple of months, and well, I'll even go as far as saying it could even happen as early as Infocom this year. You're looking at financial crashes with, major tech companies, Meta losing a couple of thousand staff. Was it 10,000 staff globally?
Yep.
Only lately, you're talking about all the tech firms losing staff. You're talking about technology banks going out of business. Is this going to affect the AV industry, do you think?
Do I think it's going to, I mean, everything has a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
It's so, like, what's the direct, ultimately, if you look at it this way, is that these gigantic tech firms, so if we're talking Meta and Google and Amazon and, the banks as well, these are all places that buy technology. They buy AV technology for their offices. They are refresh cycles and everything. And so the issue is that if they're having a financial crisis, they have to cut down spending. And
And
where
less
they cut down
innovations.
spending,
I think less innovations. We might be seeing a lot of this. Like, we have the difficulty that we're still coming out of the COVID and supply chain issues. To maybe this is going to slow things down. People aren't going to spend the money on the innovation departments, or it's either going to be that or the after sales.
so, like, I guess the way I look at it, and listen, you're talking to somebody whose job is to hype up things. So
Absolutely.
I may not be the right source on any of this, but I believe innovation.
Well, then you could say it about your competitors.
But listen, I would say, like, innovation wins out,
Yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
if you're doing something great, if you're moving things forward, people in the market respond. So to me, I think, I don't see any reason, to be afraid of this. I think more now than ever, you've got to be able to have the relationships with your customers. I think the times of just selling and walking away are they're kind of past. I think you've got to spend a little bit more time understanding your customer. You've got and helping them design the right solution. I've been in many, enterprise level companies and universities, and they've just got back rooms full of boxes and everything that they'll never touch.
Mhm.
And, I think that's the level that you might be seeing a little bit of shift in, is instead of having all these extra spare units, they're tightening up what they're actually purchasing, because they actually are just going to buy what they need. So, like, is that a bad thing? I don't necessarily think so. I
I
think,
think that's what we've been missing. You know, like from the amount of trade shows I've gone to, okay, I haven't gone to as many as you guys, okay, but like I think my first ISE felt like back in Amsterdam. It felt like we're going to show you these products on our booth.
Yeah.
To people now at ISE going, oh, who are you? Where are you from? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, you work in higher ed. Okay, so this is what I'm going to show you that we might think is a solution, or hear about some problems you are facing with your universities. But that has only happened, and I think like most of the ones, like even if we talk about higher ed AV, would agree with me, and Hetma being massive now as a influencer over in
Mhm.
America, that now the higher ed vertical is being listened to, of going, okay, now, we understand that. And also the big effect COVID has had on people listening to go, there's a big vertical over there that needs support with hybrid learning, with
Yep.
online learning, with face-to-face learning, that was for a long time forgotten about, I feel.
It's funny because having done so much work in the higher ed vertical over my career, it's actually it's I'd say it's probably my favorite out of all of them. Like, and I don't know if that's saying much, but like I think there's a rationale for it.
Mm.
Um, Higher ed is pretty much enterprise, it's athletics, it's medical, it's every single vertical rolled into one. And
That's a
for
really nice way of putting it. I'm going to
right,
use
but
that a quote of the week.
okay,
That's a really nice way of putting it, but it's true.
it is true. So like, I last week I actually visited BC at Vanderbilt, and we went to Middle Tennessee State University, who is one of our biggest customers. They've got, I think, 400 plus Pearl units, all classroom capture, and they're doing some amazing stuff. And you go walk around a college campus, and it's lively. There's young people, there's people learning, there's sports, there's socialization and everything. And then you see just how diverse the schools within the universities and colleges are: School of Business, art, like architectural and design. MTSU has a building called the Concrete Building, and
Okay.
it's like literally it's a building that they work on like architectural type of skills and everything, but like from like the concrete perspective and everything. So like you sit there and you walk through, and it's been, I'm trying to think, it's been over 20 years for me since I was last in school, and I don't remember any of this. I remember going into a classroom that looked like a high school classroom, that didn't have a display. It was maybe just an overhead projector, and that was it. And listening to someone talk, or going into a lecture hall and then listening to somebody talk. And I see how innovation in higher ed has just made everything possible. And I'm not just talking about from the classroom. What's really cool, and we could talk about it a little bit more in depth later, is one thing that I've been doing a lot of work on is how our partners and customers are moving video forward on campus. And so we're putting together this event for next month, depending on when this comes out, April 12th, where we're taking Mr. Way and his new digital creative lab, and how he's got esports and podcasting
Oh,
and
I'm
TikTok
so
Studio.
looking. I've seen a couple of things behind the scenes. I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to
And
seeing.
I remember talking to Joe about it, must be like a year ago at this point, maybe even more than that, and what his vision was. And I sat there and I'm like, man, like school is so different now, because when I was young, an esports, a podcast, a TikTok, like there are careers in all of this, and the technology is enabling students to be able to do different things. In addition, we've got an athletics part as well, athletics and events, the University of Oregon, MTSU, and their classroom capture, and Vanderbilt with their one-touch studios. And because that's the thing that fascinates me, is how we use video on campus. And AV is how we do it. And it creates a completely different experience for everybody.
But like the one thing I find, you know, like I I always think we have to link in with the educational technologists or the learning technologists, and sometimes you have to think of like the whole educational pedagogy.
Mhm.
You know what? Goes over my head. I'll admit it on live on the podcast. Sometimes all these terminologies go over my head. It's like, you want to talk tech with me? I'll talk tech with you. But when you go down to the educational there's so many different pedagogies of of learning
Oh
that
yeah.
it's like you explain to me as a lecturer what you want to do, and I can come out with a solution similar to you, Ron. But like when you try and type, even when last week I was with my colleague trying to type up a grant form, I was like, explain the pedagogy of blah 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 of how you're going to use this audiovisual equipment in the room. I was like, huh?
Yeah, no, what's so funny is that there I think things got needlessly complex in higher education for a little bit. Where I've seen a little bit of change, and maybe you can tell me. I'll interview you for a little bit. So the big thing that I've been hearing and noticing is I don't want to call it the death of active learning, but the shift of active learning. And I feel like, to me, I'm like, this is a COVID, this is a COVID thing that back in 2016, 17, 18, rooms are now designed with wheels on every chair, wheels on every desk, screens everywhere,
Yeah.
and no lectern, no lectern. The professor stands somewhere
Mhm.
and just talks, and then students are sharing information from screen to screen and everything. And COVID happened, and now you got to 6 feet away from each other and everything. And then it's kind of back to like, no, just professor in front, lectern is back, and they teach you. And it's so, are you seeing that type of
Yeah.
shift?
Yeah. But also, I think, well, I'm seeing the shift of going, we did everything online, now we're back on campus.
Yeah.
Because back on campus makes money for the restaurants, makes money for, we have these big campuses. We need to, pay rent and so. But as I've spoken even with Joe, is in Ireland, we have a housing crisis. We
Mhm.
have a student accommodation crisis. So I think this is going to be the push back to going, we still need to do hybrid.
Right.
For undergraduates, yes, it's a great student experience of being able to be on campus and experience the college life. For people that's doing a master's, they're more than likely going to have a job or have a family at this age in their life, and they're mature students. So you have to offer that flexibility of going, you know what? No, I don't want to be on campus. But it takes the stakeholder, it takes the end user, it takes the teacher and management to understand that we have to offer it this way, and the teacher to go and be experienced enough to be able to go, I'm talking to the classroom, but I have to also remember there's 200 students maybe on an online platform or even if there's not 200, 100 even, that we still have to try and make them feel welcome throughout my tuition.
Oh yeah.
And it's how we do that. And like personally, if I had the magic wand and be able to strip out a lot of lecture theatres and classrooms, I think it's what you described, that it has to be the ability of going, There's several screens in the room. There's chairs with wheels. We
Mhm.
can move it around. We can make it an active learning environment compared to the tiered approach of a lecture theatre.
Oh
That's
yeah.
have this ability. But then
Yeah.
I you know, it depends what university you work in, that whether they want to have this technological approach, and then management changes, people change,
Well,
and things go backwards again. You know,
and listen, not for nothing, stuff it costs money.
it
It
costs
costs
money.
time,
Yeah,
money, and and depending on where budgets are, or what technology you've been waiting for a while at this point, like it's it's rough. You guys, I think that you guys have it super rough because you had to keep the schools running during COVID.
hmm
You had to make sure that technology was in place. You had to move really quickly to do it. And so expectations have completely shifted. And, it's funny because the thing that I think about in terms of higher ed, is there's that, the saying butts and seats. And I think that's what's needed is you need to create the draw for students to want to come to class. But the thing is, you also need to have the ability for students to be able to remotely learn because we're doing everything different. I assume you're at home right now doing this
yeah,
podcast.
absolutely.
I'm at home doing this podcast. I think when I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to be working, and I'm working from home. And so I found a way to be productive without having to go into an office. And I think there's that aspect of students are able to learn without having to necessarily go into the classroom. But I would also say is there's definitely the element of socialization, and there's a different experience being in the classroom versus just strictly online learning.
Oh, of course. But like we can take it a step further, and I always bring it to the fact that it costs a lot of money to get a guest lecturer or guest professor.
Yes.
But like, let's take for example America over to Ireland. If you want to be a carbon neutral type of country that
Yeah.
is, and or university that's not spending money and fuel and you know why, like, yes, it's nice to have the ability to travel. Like I'm involved in a lot of Erasmus Plus projects across Europe, and it's great. I get to see other countries, I get to see other universities and so forth through it. However, for if you're talking about a lecturer that just needs to give maybe an hour a week lecture, this is why we need the type of hybrid classrooms to bring people into, and between that and the emergency situations of it should COVID happen again, should there be another pandemic, or even last week, like this is the crazy thing, and you know, America, you can deal with it. You've had snow, and you just go, yeah, we continue. We get a couple of flakes of snow, and Ireland just comes to a standstill. It's like, oh my God, shall we close the schools? Status yellow warnings.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't just say that's America. That's certain. I listen. I live in New Jersey. We deal with snow all the time. There's states. Listen, it rains in California sometimes, and it's a state of emergency. It's so like it's funny seeing. Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's funny because I know that I'm going to talk about my time at Crestron, and since we've brought him up so many times, and I'm sure he's feeling that sensation or something. When I first met Joe, back in I think 2018, I did a video case study with him, and I sat and I asked him a lot of questions, and I try to not do the fluff questions because who cares about those answers? We want to get something good, we want to dive deep. And so, I said to him, I'm like, seriously, this is a huge investment. The whole digital transformation of USC's campus, you're spending a lot of money and you're doing a lot of stuff. Like, why are you doing that? And we were doing the video shoot after
Mm,
COVID, or at some point during it. But he said, you know what? Live in California, there's earthquakes here.
mm,
There's natural disasters here.
mm.
And the thing is that, we had to be prepared for anything. And so the thing is that it made them look like a genius, because hey, they were prepared for everything, and COVID hits, and oh boom, we're able to do all this stuff. But the fact is that campuses need to be prepared for anything, and a lot of schools weren't. And I think that's what separated some schools from others,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
schools
Look,
are
I can
playing
throw my
catch
hand up,
up.
and I don't even need to name where I've worked, but like, yeah,
Yeah,
like you know, like when I moved from one university to the other, it's like that was one of the key things. It's like they were not moving with the times. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's funny to just see some people, it seemed like they had premonitions of it, but you know what, at the end of the day, you have no idea what's going to happen. And so being prepared, and also making sure the students, also known as customers, and I think that's a big thing that the higher ed vertical looks at, is that they technical directors, the technology people, the staff, the faculty is their customers. The students are their customers. You've got to create a seamless experience for all of them to be able to do what they need to do, which is teach and learn.
Mm.
And I think that's where you guys kind of just started noticing, like, man, we gotta update this stuff. We gotta do all this stuff. We gotta bring in all this technology. We've got to, and I know you mentioned before about kind of, the remote aspect of it, is you can bring in guest lecturers from anywhere. If somebody is sick, or somebody's a student athlete and they're traveling, you give them the ability through things like classroom capture and online learning. You give them the ability to have the classroom extend beyond the walls, beyond the room. The world is your classroom, basically,
Yeah, and that's a key point. Now you touched on it. We didn't even introduce that stage. We've gone from sharp to
Mhm.
we. There's some things happened in the middle, and then you ended up with Crestron for many years.
Sure. So it's funny because I had known of Crestron because I think I went to a swirl party while I was at Sharp.
Okay.
And so I just remember, um I'm like, yeah, I know Crestron, but like it's funny, like in my mind, couldn't exactly explain to anybody what they did. And so they had the need for a person to run PR and comms. And I went in and I met with them. And it was just such an interesting conversation. We really didn't talk about the job. We just talked about technology, almost like what we're doing right now. So it wasn't this Q&A, how would you handle this? It was just getting a feel for the personality and everything. And so when I came onto Crestron, I think that was 2016, there was so much innovation coming through, like literally day one. Over, and within the next year or two, we launched NVX, so AV
Yeah.
over IP. We launched Flex,
It
so
was
a
a
whole,
busy time. Like
it was a
2016, 2017, you're talking about a lot of 4K, you're talking about Dante, you're talking about, yeah, it was
and
big.
and by the way, I also covered residential too. So like I the entire business of Crestron, which is, the commercial
Mm.
commercial lighting, residential, was all under my purview. And I just remember going, just walking through the R&D labs and walking through the warehouses and just being like awestruck at what amazing innovation is going on, and being able to talk to smart people, engineers and everything. Like the thing at like Sony and Sharp, I never had access to the people because they're Japanese companies and
Of
didn't go
course.
to Japan.
Yeah.
And for Crestron, everything is happening in Rockley. It's all happening 8 miles from my house. And to be able to kind of go into these places, talk to the CTO, talk to the CEO, talk to the head of engineering, talk to all of these people and just understand where things are going, it was awesome. Like it was some of the best experiences I ever had, just learning about where technology can go.
Hmm. Now, what brought you to Epiphan then? It was it was
So
it was Crestron to Epiphan. Am I correct? Yeah.
yes. So what's so interesting about Epiphan is so if you're kind of looking at my career trajectory, I worked at Sony, I worked at Sharp, I worked at Crestron. So kind of like bigger to smaller is kind of the trajectory for me.
Mhm.
And what I've always wanted to do was I've always wanted to go somewhere where I can have a real immediate impact, and be able to kind of take these skills that I've developed, in marketing and communications, and be able to kind of like hit the ground running somewhere, in especially like almost in kind of, because it feels at times like a startup type of environment. It's not a startup because we've been around for 18 years,
Yeah.
but like it's got that energy and innovation and problem solving, and that I would say that hunger that you kind of miss that after a while. So like being at Crestron, we hit a point where it's like, yeah, we're the number one in AV. Like, do we have to work as hard? I don't know, but and I'm saying that in terms of like the marketing efforts, and because people were buying. And so for me, I see a lot in the vision of Epiphan, especially in terms of video. And what's kind of cool is it takes my career like full circle, because we're going to NAB in less than a month.
Yeah.
And for those in the AV industry that don't know, NAB, National Association of Broadcasters. And that's the first trade show I ever went to at Sony. And that was our big show. That was our Super Bowl every year. I hadn't been to an NAB in over a decade. And for me to be on this edge of AV broadcast, these areas that I've spent so much time in, I have love for, and to kind of work with a company that is doing great stuff.
But I think you've
And
hit something there. I'm
yeah,
sorry for interrupting, Ron, but
yeah.
like you're hitting something there because we have done in our university a digital makerspace. And
Mhm.
I think at the beginning it was okay, well, we want the end user and to come in and press the button and they're gonna do their own recording. And
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of is the Epiphan route and approach with so but then as the ball started rolling, they wanted to do podcasting. They
Yeah.
wanted to do and as it it grew with this digital makerspace. Yes, it's the same size, four walls, but then really it the image and the project scale changed. That we
Yeah.
went, no, this is going to need a small tech team behind it to support it. But it got to the stage of realizing we're doing a mini broadcast here, guys. You have the ability to have a lecture with a guest in there, or if they're doing audio, with three people sitting around three different microphones. That of course it's going to need a sound engineer to do things, or of course it's going to need a video operator, and you need a mini video mixing desk or using the Epiphan with it. But with higher ed, we are doing mini broadcasts, and I think again, it goes back to what we were talking earlier on about. Like sometimes when you're putting it together, these online courses or even hybrid courses, or even doing conferences in higher ed, you're doing a mini broadcast, you're doing live events, and you're doing hybrid events.
So let's talk about that, because
Yeah,
I think there's something, it's almost like you set me up for it. So here's the thing that I think about a lot. And in my time at Crestron, I got to kind of be in the room during some like really interesting conversations. And there was a piece that we did years ago with our CEO and Intel. We did it for AV technology, I believe. And it was talking about building a new industry, that Crestron is building a new industry. Because at that point, when we're talking about when I came on board 2016, AV is AV. IT is IT.
Oh, we're going there. We're going down this rabbit hole.
But what we saw over over the years is AV and IT becoming one, and it required
It's not one. It's not one. AV. Are you telling me AV and IT is one?
a lot of the people that manage the spaces are responsible for both.
Well,
So
this is it, and especially in higher ed.
yeah,
I'll agree, but like, I'll admit that like, I'm known as a senior tech officer in higher ed. I wouldn't know all about networking, but hey, and I'll tap into the networking team and the IT team.
Mhm.
But my background is audio and visual. And likewise, they wouldn't know as much about projectors or cameras and so forth. But it's that mix. We need to be able to talk to one another as well.
Well, that's the thing. Listen, at the end of the day, the laymen say, hey, technology people are technology people. Why don't you know everything?
Yeah, and as the end user, the stakeholder, and the teacher, they just see the word tech.
Yes.
Just fix my printer. Just change the cartridge there in that photocopier. It's like, well, that's not really my job, but hey, or to the live events and the recordings. Yeah.
But the thing is that from the way we talked about it, I'm sure I hit a nerve with the AVIT thing, but it's true. Everybody it is a uniform type of thing now, where they kind of go hand in hand. The spaces are different.
Yes.
It's not just AV anymore. You've got unified communications in the room and everything. You've got Microsoft Teams and Zoom in the room and everything. You've had to expand your skill set. Mm-hmm. And so where I'm really excited about is, I feel like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, we've gotten AV and IT to kind of be harmonious. That broadcast side almost feels like that third pillar, or the third piece of whatever, using some analogies with triangles, but it's that third piece that I think is emerging to the point where everybody really needs to start thinking about it in room design and capabilities, because you've got all this great technology. And so we've got, I'm not shilling for product, but I think it's worth talking about. So
please, let's talk about some new things that are coming.
Yeah, but I'm nobody wants to be sold to, but I think what's cool here is, so we have a technology called Epiphan Connect. Mm-hmm. And so this is software. If you have seen any of the higher ed AV episodes from Infocom or ISC, you've watched it through Epiphan Connect. So, or actually the production of it through Epiphan Connect. So what we're utilizing Microsoft Teams. So kind of what we're doing right now, obviously we're on Zoom, and we are creating real broadcast, by extracting the signal and extracting it at a high resolution and everything, so that now you can create more polished versions of everything. Right now we're sitting, there's one box there, there's one box there, there's no titles on this screen, there's no there, you know what I mean? Listen, I love the show, but the production quality is what we're doing right now. We're
Absolutely.
right.
And you know, and the more that we could do while doing this live and not having to do it in post production, for
Yeah,
me, it makes things a hell of a lot easier. But
sure.
I'll go down the route of going, okay, Epiphan has gone down the rabbit hole and gone and done a partnership with Teams.
Yep.
Can do we have an exclusive here, Ron? Will the same happen with Zoom? Is Epiphan going to go into bed with Zoom?
I cannot comment on anything, but I will say that no, don't nod your head like you got something out of me. Listen, the in technology, you never say never, because what how
That's as
what
good as a yes there, listeners.
if I said to you no, it's not happening, that's I'm smart enough to know not to say anything that means anything one way or another.
I'll
So
sign my NDA agreement later on, Ron.
exactly. Well, you might have to cut things out then. No, listen, I'd say, the good companies never cut off opportunity to expand capabilities, right? So the thing is that I'm not saying yes or no, but you'd have to think about it at some point. So, but to me, what's most important is that we've all made investments in the tools, right? So like that's the thing is that you've made an investment in Teams.
Mhm.
If you're, or you've made an investment in Zoom, let's say hypothetically, right? Like,
Yeah, we're Zoom
let-
campus
yeah,
as
okay.
is
So
Mr.
we're
Way
throwing it
over
all
there.
out there.
Yeah.
You've made an investment. Your rooms are built with all of this technology. You've got the licenses and everything. And then the question is, what more can you do with it?
Mhm.
And for some people, they're like, yeah, Zoom, Zoom, I sit here and I can meet with somebody. There's a chat functionality. It's great. And you're just like, well, what if you could do way more with it? Same thing with Teams. It's the backbone of your entire enterprise communication
But
system.
it's huge, Ron. If you go down that route and you start putting in Epiphan units into each one of your classrooms,
Mhm.
linking up classrooms, great. Okay, there's an alternative to competitors that might need video over IP. We don't need to name any of them. There's many of them in the industry.
Yeah.
To here's Epiphan, and then you go, and here's one step further. We can make this a broadcast quality.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned earlier final thirds on the bottom of it,
Yeah.
introducing the lectures and everything, and we can do that live. Or what's even better is that the technician doesn't have to sit in the room. You can actually
Yeah.
go and do it
Do
in the
everything
cloud.
do everything remotely. When we do the productions at the shows, we've got a remote producer in Ottawa.
Lovely.
So like
Yeah.
we were in Barcelona and then across the pond in a different country that's not the
That's a
United
great
States.
podcast as well, Across the Pond. I just like to
Oh yeah. Yes,
no pun intended.
no pun intended at all. But truly, like I think that's the cool thing about video. And you're in Dublin, right?
Yep, that's right.
I'm in Park Ridge, New Jersey, and we are having a live conversation. Like, I think this is one of those things where like you stop and sit and think about it every once in a while. Cause my kids are growing up with technology. I'm the generation that didn't have the internet and then had it in high school.
And likewise, like I remember doing internet radio as early as 2005.
Yeah.
And back then, you were lucky if you were doing 720p video.
Yeah.
And it was literally bringing that video down and going, how am I going to use this on a website to do information? Like you'd be lucky if you're streaming audio, and that's what we
Yeah.
were doing with the internet radio. But like if we had a bit of video as well to go with it, even better. But to what all these user collaboration softwares do now. Like back then, it was if we were lucky if we had Skype, but we couldn't ever dream about what we're doing now, where we have sat for the past 40 minutes talking about tech.
Yeah, but like that's the thing, and I think for a lot of us, because we move so fast, right? Like we're waiting for the newest thing, we're waiting for the thing that solves our newest problem and everything. Sometimes I just love to just like reminisce, and honestly, you asked me the questions about different phases of my career and everything. Is kind of like the only time I get to sit and like think and reminisce and think of like what was it like introducing the first 4K product in the United States commercially. And then you sit here and you're like, at what point did I just say like Teams and Zoom are going to be how I talk to people remotely? Like there was that one time I saw it for the first time and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm, from working in technology and marketing, I'm always trying to recapture that feeling. And I'm
Or
always
even the stage, Ron, where we go, like the fact that there is now puns that and jokes going. There was another Zoom meeting that could have been an email because we just use it that much over other technologies like that. It's easier for us to click a button and talk like this than writing it down and doing an email.
What's really funny is so I'm someone who prefers text over phone calls.
Yes, me too.
I like if you want to talk to me, text me. Or like a written word is how you reach me, basically. Text me or
Like
Slack
what we were
me.
doing, LinkedIn or
Exactly. LinkedIn. I talk to people that I really should have their phone numbers, but I just talk to them through LinkedIn messaging. I talk through Facebook Messenger. But it's so funny because I don't like talking on the phone. It's not my favorite thing. But what's so funny is that I don't have a problem with a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. Like it's replaced. It's weird hearing someone's voice and not looking at them or seeing them and seeing their body language and their reactions and everything. And so, what does this have to do with higher education? No idea. But to me, I think this is the fun evolution of where technology is going, that video has superseded everything, that these video experiences. And so now we've introduced all these video experiences. We've laid it on everyone at the same time. My 74-year-old mom understands what Zoom is and FaceTime and she has troubles with the remote control, but like this thing, she knows that if I press this button, I can see you and I can talk to you and everything. And so that went from being deeply complicated to being simple. So to me, the evolution of where video is going is that we're going to be able to do more. We're going to be able to create more. We're going to be able to create it with spending less money and less time. It'll be simple, it'll be intuitive, and we'll be able to create awesome stuff. And not for nothing, we're going to go back in 3 years and look at this podcast and say, man, this was primitive. 2 boxes, no names, black screens.
Well, and it's like I interviewed Jane Ross over at ISE, and it's like thinking of that, of what can the likes of Zoom and user collaboration softwares, and then she's like, but we've gone further than just the whole idea of going, this is for a better word, a video conference call.
Yeah.
It's a lot more in between, and then the nice thing about Zoom, like I'm a big Zoom fanatic, is the fact that they have listened to the end user. It's like, they haven't forgotten about, the business to business model, but they've also gone and looked at higher education. That's like, how can we bring in, the whole idea of breakout rooms, which could be used not just for higher ed, but it can be used for business if they want to use breakout rooms. But they've looked at it and went, we're going to add these extra things, and constantly listening. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier on, that a good company is ones that constantly listen.
Yeah.
You've done amazing things with Epiphan, and there's like what's really nice looking at your products is you have the small mini range. You even have the capture cards that
Yeah.
just like go HDMI, USB, stream to, there's a small Epiphan Mini to quite larger ranges, and now the whole idea of doing that type of broadcast production um from anywhere in the world, as you mentioned, like doing ISE and capturing the material. And you know, sometimes Epiphan, people might think of Epiphan as like, oh, it's a capture device, but
Yeah.
it's a lot more than that. And how, like I say, that was a challenge for you, Ron, to get people to realize that no, it's not just a camera recording
Yeah.
device. It's also streaming. It's also broadcast. How did you break that image?
So I would say I'm still trying to break the image. So we're not there yet. So it's, and I mentioned it earlier, and I want to kind of go back to this webinar thing. Actually, we're calling it a symposium because webinars, webinars are trying to sell people on stuff. It's a
Yes.
presentation on, hey, here's 5 things you can do with our product. To me, the way I've looked at the people in higher education, I've always liked to tell stories about innovation and what the end user is doing. So basically, they're the hero of the story. And it's what I used to do at Crestron, is I want you to watch a piece on a university, a company, a brand that you are familiar with, and I want you to have more love for that brand. If you learn about what the technology is that goes in there and that it's Crestron or Epiphan, even better. But I want you to look at these people like they're heroes. I want you to look at people like they're enabling the future of everything. So with this symposium that we're doing, we've got 4 schools, 4 experts that are doing very diverse things. And listen, obviously they're utilizing the Pearl hardware to do it. But they're also using other hardware. They're using other companies, AV companies and display manufacturers and microphone companies. Like it is a universe of technology. It is all these ingredients that make these wonderful spaces. And so for me, I'm not looking to own the room. I'm looking to be part of your vision of how you move video forward. So whether you're Middle Tennessee and you're doing classroom capture, with the Pearl and having a capture card hooked into it to give your students the best quality possible because they are your customers. And, how many times does a student sit there? One thing in our conversation, I'm not taking notes on anything. We're talking to each other. Could you imagine you start asking me things or teaching me things and I'm sitting here and I'm taking notes? I miss half of what you say. We can't have an engaging conversation, a back and forth. And if I'm sitting here trying to get everything and take every note, I may miss a bunch of things. And guess what? I got to talk to you after class. And so instead of doing that, why not keep that active learning aspect, which is the back and forth, raising your hand, focusing on the conversation, having everything captured in the background so you can review it afterwards and see how you got to that point, but also be able to answer your questions. So to me, that's a big part of how I like to talk about it. So you've got Joe's space where you can do podcasting, TikTok, esports, all of these kind of, for, any, older person feel like an alternative career, right? Like you go to school to learn, business or science or medicine or like these, but you know what? There's people that are insanely successful in these particular areas, and to discount them as kind of like for kids is kind of ridiculous. So you've got Joe moving video forward in those spaces and also on campus as well. You've got Scott LaBounty, who's at University of Oregon, utilizing it for athletics. They're utilizing the Pearl devices to capture tennis matches. They've got a tennis center and they're streaming it on the network. I believe it's the Pac-12 network, which is the big college station.
Yes,
They're
yeah.
streaming it to it. They're creating an actual television broadcast at the university level. And and then you've got BC, our friend BC at Vanderbilt. He's doing one-touch studios where a professor can go in and create video lectures, content for remote students or as supplements. And so you see all this great work being done, video on campus, and how they're moving everything forward. It's just awesome. So like you ask me, how do I spread the message of it? And this is how I do it. What are people doing with video? And tell everybody about it. So it's not, listen, you could do it with any type of technology. Hopefully you utilize our technology because it's simpler, less expensive, and more intuitive. But the thing is that they're doing great stuff. They're moving experiences forward for their students, for their faculty and everything. I'm really excited about this. And I feel like that level, when you can talk to technology professionals in education and you speak on that level, but then you also ask them, hey, what are you looking to do? Where are the difficulties you have? And you become that person that is understanding, and you provide that feedback to engineering and R&D, and you work towards solutions that work, that make their lives easier. That's the fun part for me. I like that puzzle solving.
And I think it's what we touched on earlier. Like, hopefully, with the technology crashes that we're seeing, that the R&D is still as vital as it was.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the flight or fight, or the survival in this technology problems that we're having with tech companies losing a lot of staff. If you lose the R&D staff, the product stays still. If the product stays still and nothing's getting developed, you're going to be left behind, because that is tech. With that in mind, is there any things that you can even say be excited for InfoComm? Because, well, you're talking about NAB is coming up. Is there anything going to be unveiled at NABs, or is there anything going to be held off to InfoComm? It can be as simple as a yes or no.
So you know what? Yes, we are announcing something at NAB. Not telling you what it is. That's why I put out the press releases. So yes, I'm currently working on a press release for a really exciting announcement. Listen, innovation, I think, is it's the lifeblood of this industry, right? Like no engineer wants to go to work every day and do the same thing that they've always done. They want to create something new. They want to build something that solves a need. And the companies that are kind of like, yeah, we did everything. No company will ever say that. Obviously you can cut staff and everything, and it becomes harder to innovate. But, all of these companies in our great industry are looking to move things forward, do things that couldn't be done before. For us, we're in the same boat. We're looking to make some really awesome announcements and make the lives of everyone in higher education easier, and give you the ability to do more than you've ever been able to do before, without it being taxing on you. I think I'm
going to go back to the Epiphan Connect. Is it a license-based system? Is it cost per license?
It's cloud-based. So there's license and there's time increments for it. So it's you can utilize it as much or as little as you want, but it's the production element. It's that way.
Okay. Now, because we're tight on time, we're gonna talk about some quick fire questions. Your
Okay.
favorite trade show?
My favorite trade show is it's now ISC. It used to be Infocom.
All right. So, well, we also talked about NABs earlier on, so it's ISE now. Um, if when you go to Infocoms, Vegas or Florida?
Vegas.
Yes. So I'm hearing, and I'm Joe and Co. I hope to be over at ISE in Vegas. I was said come over to Infocom this year. I was like, I'm away that many times this year that I think I'll get divorced by my wife if if I'm away any more this summer.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter. All Things TechIE Podcast.
If people want to get in contact with you, Ron, and find out more about Epiphan, what's the best way of getting in contact?
I mean, I think those are two separate things, right? So I think if people are looking to get in contact with me, LinkedIn is probably a really good spot. So literally just type in Ron Epstein and Epiphan or Crestron or Sony or whatever it is, you'll find me. But also in the higher ed space, I'm actually going to be doing a little traveling in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be at MCUAV next week. 2 weeks after that, I'll be at NW Met. And then obviously planning on ETC later this year at USC. And listen, I'm got my fingers crossed that we can do a in-person HETMA event. I'll also be at the I'll also be doing some work with HETMA at Infocom and also be attending those higher ed AV awards. Separately, if you want to learn more about Epiphan, epiphan.com, EPIPHAN.com. Look us up and find me on LinkedIn and let's talk.
I do have a final question. I thought we asked this earlier. Your favorite case study with Epiphan? Like I've been looking at some of the amazing things that Epiphan have done. One of my favorites because I used to be a heavily involved scout leader. I did an internet radio on scouting, and a couple of your team took an Epiphan Pearl up the mountains.
Yep.
That looked cool. And just getting your little satellite Wi-Fi going in the back of your box. That looked like fun. But what for you? What has been your favorite case study to come across?
It's funny. You always remember your first. So my first case study that I did with Epiphan was North Carolina State, NC State, because there is always listen, I'm not a technology person. I can't hook things up. But what always does it for me is when I go on location and I ask questions and I learn and I see, it really starts putting together the whole puzzle in my mind. And so NC State was the first video that I did. And that was probably maybe 2 or 3 months into my time at Epiphan. And after that video, on location shoot, I got it. I understood it, and it all made perfect sense to me. So to me, you always remember your first video. Listen, my first video at Crestron was the University of Central Florida with Donnie. That was the first time that I ever, that I ever really understood how they were using the technology, and then it paved the way for all the other work. So yeah, simple put, NC State first case study gave me really great perspective, and also it's higher education, right?
Yeah, well, Ron, I am looking forward to hearing about. You know what? I'm going off mic. We're going to talk about NDA agreements and find out about what's happening with everybody. But for you listeners, sorry we can't tell you any more apart from. Stay tuned that NAB is going to be a big announcement, according to Ron.
Yes, for sure.
Ron, really appreciate you coming on All Things TechIE. I know we've gone over the time, but we've had so much fun talking about tech here.
Man, we spent a big chunk of St. Patrick's Day together. It's funny because I have this in the background. I'm saving it for when we're done. So
Nice.
I don't know if you've started or not, but
I haven't started yet. No, like it's going to be a long weekend. I have to admit to listeners, I'm not really a Guinness drinker. Yeah, some people love it, some people hate it. I'm not a massive fan. I like my Irish craft beers, as I was telling you over at ISE. So we have to get you over to Ireland. That's the next thing.
I mean, what are we waiting for?
Yeah, what are we waiting for? On that note, Ron and I are going to go have a drink.
Yes.
You can talk to Ron on LinkedIn and also check out epiphan.com. That has been the All Things TechIE Podcast, episode 72.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter. All Things TechIE Podcast.
My thanks to Ron Epstein for joining us on episode 72 of the All Things TechIE Podcast. We have some great shows coming up and some under the spotlights coming up with Biamp and more. All I can say, and more. Stay tuned. Some great unveilings coming up in the next week or two on the All Things TechIE Podcast. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe and share. Remember, the views are my personal views and not the views of our employers. For more information on our terms and conditions, visit our website www.allthingstech.ie. See you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to All Things TechIE Podcast, part of the Extreme Media Network. Follow us on Twitter at AVTechJunkies. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch our show on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/@Justin_or_Dawson. Previous episodes of our show can be found on our official site, www.allthingstech.ie. For advertising and sponsorship opportunities, please visit www.extrememedia.ie.